All right, so Patty and I are really excited to spend this time with you all today. Over the past 4 years, we have led these annual grants workshops. Some of you might have attended in the past. And usually we discuss, what makes a quality grant proposal, and we're still going to do that. But this year we've decided to take a slightly different approach with our content, really pulling back the curtain a bit to walk you through what actually happens after you submit your grant application and what us as reviewers are really discussing in the boardroom. Because I think for a lot of organizations, that part can feel a bit unclear. And it can feel like you're sending your application out into the abyss. What happens next? So today we're going to walk you inside the review room to let you know what grant making staff are looking at, what board members are discussing, and ultimately what helps an application stand out when the applicant pool continues to grow and get more competitive. But before we begin, I just want to see a show of hands. Who all is joining us for the first time or hasn't yet received a grant from FCP? I'm going to scroll through. Okay. All right. Great. So it's awesome to see some familiar faces and also some new folks on the call. So for those who are new, welcome. We're happy to have you. We will leave time for questions at the end of this presentation. So we do ask that if you have questions along the way, please either hold them to the end or put them in the chat and we can refer back to them later. Toby will be monitoring the chat so we can address questions when we wrap up. And if we don't get to your question, we will leave you with our email addresses or reach out to you directly with an answer. Next slide, please. So I am so happy to once again be joined by Dr. Patty Smallacombe today to present this workshop. Before we dive in, we'll quickly introduce ourselves. So my name is Morgan Clark. I am the Director of Grants and Programs at Foundations Community Partnership. And though I am a new addition to the staff at FCP, I also served as an FCP board member with Patty over the past 5 years. And before that, going back to 2016, I was introduced to FCP through our Summer Youth Corps internship program. So I'm very happy to be continuing my FCP journey on the staff side 10 years later. It's very full circle for me. I hold a bachelor's degree in human development and family studies from Penn State University and a master's degree in nonprofit leadership from the University of Pennsylvania. And over the past 6 years, I've worked for a National Veteran Service Organization, managing corporate and foundation partnerships. But my main focus was on managing grants from applications to reporting. So I have been on the grant writing side. In my role at FCP, I get to be on the other side of the table now, working closely with our applicants through the entire grants process, from those early conversations all the way through to grant awards and reporting questions. And I also support our internal review process with our CEO, Toby, who is on the call today in blue as well as our board. So a lot of what I'll share today comes directly from what we're seeing across applications and the kinds of conversations that are happening behind the scenes. When you see this staff icon here, this clipboard in the upper corner of your slide, you'll know it's me giving you a staff perspective. So next, I will pass it over to Patty to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Morgan. And we are so delighted as a board to have you join the staff and work with Toby, Dr. Brune. So let me introduce myself. Good morning. I'm Patty Smallacombe. I'm a board member of Foundations Community Partnership, and I've been on the board since March of 2019. I currently serve as the board secretary and the chair of the Program Development and Education Committee, which reviews many of the grants that come in from organizations like yours. I currently work at Thomas Edison State University as a professional learning review specialist on a grant from the New Jersey Department of Labor called the Apprenticeship Degree Initiative. It is definitely an interesting experience for me to be on the grant staff side. I have decades of experience with grant writing, grants management, and as a grant funder at both the United Way of Bucks County and here on the board with FCP. I completed my doctorate from University of Pennsylvania in sociology and urban studies. As a sociologist by training, my focus has been on qualitative and field research methodologies. So I have a bent towards qualitative reporting as well. When you see this board icon, which has the table in the upper right corner of the slide, you'll know that I'm giving the board's perspective. So together, Morgan and I are going to give you a 360 view. Next slide, please. I'll pass it to Morgan, tell you a little bit about Foundation's Community Partnership.
Thank you, Patty. So just to ground us quickly in who FCP is. So founded in 2007, Foundation's Community Partnership is a private nonprofit grant-making foundation focused on supporting the behavioral health and human service needs of children, young adults, and families here in Bucks County. In addition to grant making, we also support scholarships for each of the Bucks County high schools, as well as professional development opportunities for nonprofits such as this, and our Summer Youth Corps internship program. Of course, today we're going to focus on the grant making side, but if you'd like to learn more about FCP and our various other initiatives and events, please visit us at fcpartnership.org. You can also join our mailing list. If you scroll down to the bottom of the website, there's a button there you can keep in touch with us. We hope that you find today's content relevant not only to FCP and applying to our grant cycles, which we hope that you do, but that this information can be easily translated across the board as you search for and apply to grants. So with that, we are going to shift back to Patty, who will talk a little bit about getting to know your funder before you apply.
Thanks so much, Morgan. All right, so this is a big section and a very important one, getting to know the funder at the beginning of your process and application. So getting to know the funder is important and an important first step in considering an application for needed resources for your organization and programs. We cannot highlight enough the importance of understanding the funder's mission statement and priorities. You can find that important information about funders on their website, but we also suggest using a foundation search service like Candid's Foundation Directory Online. Another one is called Foundation Search. If your organization or agency doesn't have a subscription to one of those, you can gain access to one at the Grundy Library in Bristol Borough. They are a nonprofit center, and as part of their services, they give access to the public to the Foundation Directory Online and help you with getting started with your search to look for and prospect for grant opportunities. Another nonprofit center in the area is at the Free Library of Philadelphia, so you have that choice as well. The first question guiding your search should be, what is the mission of the funder? Do they support human services, education, animal welfare? Do they address climate change and the environment? Morgan has given you the FCP mission and priorities, but here's another example that I'd like to use on how to start doing this kind of research. The Connolly Foundation in Philadelphia is inspired by Catholic heritage and seeks to improve the quality of life in the Philadelphia region. It supports 501c3 organizations in education, human services, and arts and civic life, focusing on fostering resilience, educational access, and upward mobility. So that's the description of the Connolly Foundation. Their stated mission is to enhance the quality of life in the Philadelphia region by supporting charitable organizations in education, human services, arts and culture, and civic life that strengthen resilience and help people flourish. So we see then their key priority funding areas, which they, on their website, they detail. I'll just mention them again. Catholic education in particular, as this is a foundation that's founding was in the Catholic tradition. Human services, arts and culture, civic life, and renewal. So you really want to read what is included in that. Under human services, it could be food, emergency shelter, clothing, critical home repair, that sort of thing. And they give you some of the terms and the sort of vision of what they want to do, like stability through youth and workforce development programs. There's a lot of clues in those priorities about where their priorities lie. Another important piece to determine is whether you are in their geographic targeted region. So with Connolly Foundation, they limit their philanthropy to the city of Philadelphia and surrounding counties, which they name as Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, as well as the city of Camden, New Jersey. So you might not have known that they serve Camden as well. And then you want to look at their funding guidelines. They target 501c3 organizations with strong leadership. They have a preference for programs and projects that are in your application that have impact and multiple funding sources. So they do not want to be the only funder on your project. Very important point. And limitations, what they don't fund is very important to look at as well. So Connolly does not fund endowments, research, or national organizations that do not have a local focus. So that is critical to determining whether this is going to be a good fit for your application to a funder that, that serves the needs that your organization addresses. You also want to look at what organizations the foundation has funded previously. That could be on the funder's website. It's definitely in these foundation search platforms. And the reason why this is important is it gives you an idea of whether organizations like yours have been supported by this funder, and if so, what type of support: programmatic, capital, or operating funds. Again, very important to know in terms of targeting your application on the needs of your organization and what this foundation typically funds. Next, you want to check the application packet very thoroughly. I again cannot emphasize this too much. Before you get started, you need to map out the timeline for how long you have to produce this application to meet the funder's submission deadline. Some funders do give out funds on a rolling basis, and they can run out of money by the time the submission deadline rolls around. So in that case, if they say rolling funding, you want to submit earlier than the deadline in order to be considered. So in this timeline, you want to know from the upfront, is this application going to require letters of support from partners who work with your agency? Is a project budget needed? Likely yes. And Morgan will talk more about that. They want to see by line items what you're going to utilize the funds for. Will you need an evaluation plan? And will that require an external evaluator to conduct a review of your program implementation, outcomes and overall impact? You want to know those things right away because it might take you some time to get those letters of support or to identify and engage with an external evaluator. So finally, what are the application reporting requirements? It's really helpful to review those reporting guidelines to know how frequently does your organization need to report to the funder, what will be included in those reports. Your team can actually set up a strategy to collect data on your program and participants along the way to be ready to meet these reporting deadlines. And we will close out with a little bit more about reporting. So next slide. And I turn it back to Morgan about the pre-application conversation.
Thank you, Patty. So just out of curiosity, if you all could put in the chat, how many of you have ever reached out to a funder to have a meeting or a call prior to submitting your application? And for those who did reach out, did you get a response, and was the response helpful? That's great. Nicole says numerous times, always helpful. Yes. Just getting started. Okay, all right, great. Well, it's nice to see that overall it's very helpful because that is the point that we're getting at today. Kristen says, yes, some responded and that was helpful. Others' lack of response felt like a signal. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. Have also been told do not reach out. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. So, this is something that I think is really underutilized, both on the funder side and the grantee side, pre-application conversations. After you've done your due diligence on a potential funder, as Patty was talking about, and you feel they are a good fit for your needs, it's time to reach out. From a staff perspective, this is incredibly helpful, not just for you as a grantee, but for us as well. First, pre-application conversations or meetings help you evaluate whether your project actually aligns with the funder's priorities before you spend potentially hours upon hours writing a full proposal. Saves a lot of time. Sometimes we as funders can quickly identify whether something is a strong fit or maybe suggest a different approach or even a different funding cycle. It's also your chance to ask us questions, things that might not be fully clear in the guidelines, and to get some informal guidance. The more specific you can be with your questions, the more specific feedback and answers you'll often receive from funders. And this goes back to just doing your research ahead of time. And I want to emphasize that last point a bit. While we, sadly cannot help you write the proposal, we can help clarify how your idea might fit within our priorities or where we might have questions. I always say not to toot our own horn, but I think FCP as a smaller grant funder is very good about reaching out with questions, helping to clarify things within the application. Not all foundations, not all funders have the bandwidth to do that. Some are funding organizations across the country or across the world. And so sometimes that can be a limitation. But having those conversations allows us as staff to give you honest feedback and tips regarding what might resonate best with our board. In terms of how to approach this with potential funders, we suggest keeping it simple and, of course, respectful of time. Start by doing your homework, review the funder's guidelines, priorities, and previously funded projects. And like any job interview, it pays to go in with some knowledge of the organization and their core pillars and focus areas. And then just send a brief, concise email that includes, number one, a sentence or two about your organization, a brief description of your funding need, and then importantly, why you think it aligns with the funder's priorities. Just a very, very brief email. And then just ask for a 10 to 15-minute call. I think in the past, I've found that if you say brief call, I don't know if I always get the same response as if I say 10 to 15 minutes of your time. Most people have 10 to 15 minutes. And if they don't, they're probably lying. If you don't hear back within a few days to a week, which I know is unfortunately more often than not, follow up politely or call the number on the website. Just keep in mind that staff are often managing a high volume of requests. I recently attended another webinar where there were a bunch of funders on a panel, and they were asked, how many times does it take for you to get annoyed with an applicant when they're reaching out? And I was surprised none of them said that they get annoyed. And I know that's the case for Toby and I at FCP as well. We do not get annoyed with your questions. We want you to ask questions. We want to see you succeed. Persistence is key, and it does get noticed. If a funder can't speak with you, they will let you know, or they should let you know. Otherwise, keep reaching out. Be persistent. From there, let's say you do apply. What happens next? So that's what we're going to get into on the next slide. Okay, so once an application is submitted, staff are usually the first stop in the review process. So we serve as that initial filter for applications before they reach the board for final review. So at a high level, we're really looking at three things first. These include eligibility, and then again, alignment with priorities is a big one, and whether your application is complete. If something doesn't meet those basic criteria, the application likely will not move forward. In FCP's case, we do reach out to applicants to ask questions and provide feedback. Again, not every funder can or will do this, especially those larger funders managing applicants from a larger footprint. So it's essential that at the very least, you are 100% sure that you're eligible, you're aligned, and your application is complete. From there, we dig into a few key areas. One is your project and organizational budget, which we'll talk more about, your capacity to carry your project out, your proposed outcomes and your evaluation plan, and your prior funding history. So for example, if you are a previous applicant of FCP, but you never submitted your final report for the last grant that you received from us, that in our guidelines would make you ineligible to receive another grant. So we'll usually reach out and let someone know, especially if we can spot that they're working on a draft, we'll reach out and say, hey, hold on, before you submit that, submit your final report. So that just goes back to reading the guidelines and making sure you're aware of all of those things up front. So we're also thinking about whether all of the above makes sense together. Is the proposal clear? Is it realistic? And can we anticipate any red flags that the board might call out? And I'll just say staff are often reviewing, again, a high number of applications in a relatively short amount of time. So the applications that really stand out are the ones that are clear, they're easy to follow, and they don't make us work to understand what you're trying to do and why. Try to keep your language simple, limit the use of acronyms, jargon, or technical terms, so us as reviewers can easily understand your work on the first read. Our role as staff is also to help support the board's review. So we, with the board, are highlighting strengths, we flag questions and concerns, and we provide context, whether that's about the organization, the need in our community, or prior funding. So going back to that, the importance of the pre-application conversations with funders, if we have the opportunity to hear about your work, or even better, we visit you, we see it in action, it's easier for us as staff to bring life to your application when we're in the boardroom. And then there's also due diligence happening on our end. That can include looking at your financials, reviewing audits, the not so glamorous stuff, understanding organizational relationships, how you're working with other nonprofits in the area, and taking extra time to get acquainted with new applicants especially. So that's the staff side of things. From there, applications move to the board, and Patty is going to walk you through what that looks like from their perspective.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Such important points. I want to point out that Foundations Community Partnership does engage board members to review applications. So I'm speaking really from that experience. Not all funders do, but hopefully that's a common practice. Morgan's covered the initial staff review for Foundations Community Partnership and the many other funders that engage their boards. In a foundation that does include their board of directors in this process, board members typically review a smaller set of proposals that have been vetted and recommended by the staff. I'm going to touch on some of the points that board members tend to focus on. Board reviews tend to happen at the committee level to provide recommendations to the full board of directors. Board members often rely on those staff summaries and recommendations. They may ask clarifying questions to the foundation staff about the risk, the ability to sustain a project, or organizational capacity. Alignment with the foundation's mission and priorities. We've talked a lot about that, but let me break this down from a board review point of view. Board members are really interested in the big picture impact of this program or project that you're proposing to implement. In an application, you'll want to state the need or the problem that you're addressing and how your organization or program will offer a solution, which is kind of a reductive word, but how are you going to address this need or issue in the community? And a tip is that it's often helpful to include some research on the stated issue more generally that puts your project in a bigger picture, and then how does that issue present in the local community you are serving? So I move on to talk about the community benefit. This is an important consideration in your application approach. What is the benefit in the local community? We found out from the example of the Connolly Foundation, you could be a national organization, but if you don't have a local footprint, they're not going to consider your application for funding. Board members bring a very diverse stream of professional and community backgrounds, and they take particular interest when reviewing application from these points of view. It's natural. It's why they've been invited to serve on the board. These board members are often community and champions of residents. Sometimes they live in the community and they're champions of residents and community health and culture in that local context. So be sure to show them. We talk a lot about showing, not telling. Demonstrate. What does the positive change look like in this local community in which you are delivering the program? What does that look like for the residents and participants? What does that look like for the community as a whole if you're addressing more of a community level need? Creating a compelling picture of this is extremely influential with board members. They need to see it. Another point is that board members are responsible for the use of foundation funds. Their main function is the fiduciary responsibility for the foundation funds and endowments. So board members take very seriously the use of the foundation funds and expect to see in applications that these program or project budgets are presented with detail about cost areas, specific pricing, and exactly how those funds are going to be used. Reporting must also show that funds are used to advance the proposed purpose and programmatic intervention by the organization, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But I want to address perhaps an elephant in the room. I don't know. We at FCP and board reviewers call it the intangibles. And this is the part of application review that might seem to the applicant to be subjective, but it is important for you to be aware of it. And I can speak to the way that we use intangibles for an FCP application. Board members have the chance to comment freely under intangibles, and this section can include specific experience that the applicant organization describes that the board member may connect to, the issue being addressed by a proposed project, or the reiteration of the big picture community impact that the board reviewer understands is involved in the project or not. So despite any technical aspects of the presentation, the board members want to know basically where this fits in the bigger picture and in the local community. And during the review meetings with staff, board members at FCP who review applications tend to discuss their intangibles in terms of observations, concerns, and maybe their own or their organization's, their professional organization's investment in the proposed program or project. So the group discussion in this committee setting with staff is often for board members to ask staff for clarifications so they can put these intangibles into a context so that these considerations are not just a sort of biased, or I like to use the word cranky response, but rather it's informative and mission aligned to make sure that this is going to be a good investment. So I think it is important for you to know those discussions go on, but they are informed and supported by staff bringing in information to clarify. So next slide. Morgan's going to talk a little bit about common pitfalls in applications from the staff perspective.
Thank you, Patty. And before we get into the common pitfalls, I'll say these are really common. If you've done any of these, you're not alone. I know I've committed many of these grant misdemeanors in the past myself. One of the biggest pitfalls includes a lack of alignment with the funder's priorities. And again, I'm giving the staff perspective here. Even if it's a strong program, if we can't clearly connect it to what we fund, it's going to be a challenge. Always difficult for us. We hear about a lot of incredible organizations doing incredible things, and we want to fund all of them, but at the end of the day, we have to stay under the scope of our mission and our umbrella as well, just as you do. Um, Another is unclear or overly complex project descriptions. So if we have to read something again multiple times to understand it, that's usually a sign that it needs to be simplified. Remember to read your application as if you don't know anything about your organization, because reviewers often don't know anything about your organization. Or even if we do, and you know that we've funded you in the past, it doesn't hurt to give a refresher and keep it clear. Um, One of the things that can be really helpful is to have someone else read your application, someone who's more removed. When you've been writing an application and you're in it, you're in your program, you're in your organization every day, um, you can have those blinders on and forget that not everybody knows the terms that you're using or the jargon. If that's someone else who reads your application, whether it's a colleague or your husband or your wife, or if they're left with questions, we likely will be left with questions as well. We also often see missing or incomplete project budgets or budgets that don't tell the whole story of the project. So, for example, if you are requesting funding to support a new summer camp activity space that you are creating, but your budget includes a line item for transportation with $3,000 of your request to be designated to transportation. You'll need to just ensure that that is clearly explained in the narrative. Your budget upload should tell the story of your project request and specifically how the funds that you're requesting are going to be used. And while, it's totally okay to ask for transportation expenses, at least in our case, it just needs to make sense in the broader context of your proposal. Also, don't forget to clearly demonstrate, again, where your requested dollars are going to be spent from FCP or whatever funder you're reaching out to. The most successful budgets we see have a column for the FCP request, designating portions of your overall ask to various line items. So if you're requesting a total of $10,000, break it down for us. Where in your overall budget will that be spent? And then two big ones, a weak or unclear statement of need, and not explaining how the program will be sustained beyond the grant period. As staff, again, we review many applicants and serve as that filter for what gets to the board. If you can clearly show the need in the community, especially for organizations like FCP who serve a specific county or locale, that will help a lot. Additionally, telling a story or adding a testimonial from one of your constituents goes a long way to, like Patty said, showing rather than telling about your impact. Oftentimes, grant applications, FCPs included, will have optional uploads or attachments towards the end. And far too often we see these are blank. But use that opportunity. Again, it's optional. You're not going to get penalized for not using it. But it's an opportunity to upload program materials, stories, even upload a document that includes a link to a video of your work. If you have a YouTube channel or you took a video of camp participants talking about how the summer impacted them, that's kind of a way to get around it. Some applications will have a spot to put a video link if you'd like, but uploading a document with a link is always a good workaround. At the end of the day, we are all in the business of helping people, so leaving that human impact out of your proposal would be a mistake. Next, I am going to pass it back to Patty to share what she's seeing from the board side, including a few newer trends that we've been noticing.
Thank you, Morgan. So some of this is going to reiterate what we've already talked about, but from the point of view of what's missing or what is not clear. So some common pitfalls that board members notice and and take into account when thinking about recommending a proposal for funding include board members can immediately recognize a proposal that appears to be generic and not tailored to the funder. So it's very tempting to, as an organization, to say, we need to apply to as many funders as we can. Let's just copy and paste our application and throw it into into a portal somewhere and see what happens. And those proposals might be a stretch to align with that foundation's mission and priorities, and board members can definitely identify those right off the bat. As a result, there's often identified technical parts of the application that are not working together when this is a sort of a generic application and not tailored to funders' mission priorities and so on. Some of the problems we see are the scope of the project to be funded is outside the scope of what the funder can actually fund. So Foundation's community partnership might give funding for a year, and a proposal might propose delivering this service or intervention or program beyond a year, and that is unclear in the narrative. It might be, again, unrealistic to deliver this program in the timeline, and there's often a maximum amount that you can ask of a funder, so you need to make sure that your project can be delivered within that time frame and that funding maximum should you be awarded. As Morgan was saying, there's often a disconnect between the proposal budget and the program project that's outlined in the narrative. So just briefly, let's say you're applying to support a peer tutoring program that's going to require staff time, educational supplies, food, and transportation is necessary, but the narrative lists the school as a partner that's going to provide that transportation for free. And then the board member sees in the project budget that there's a request for a capital expenditure to buy a van. So that is a mismatch. It's not that the van's not important, but that's not what the narrative of the proposal is outlining is going to be requested. So really, the narrative, the budget, and outcomes, as we're going to speak about now, really have to align to make a strong and quality proposal. So there are often problems with showing outcomes and impacts in proposals. Outcomes or impact are not clearly defined or measurable, either because the scope of the project is not defined well, or the applicant has not developed what we call SMART goals and objectives, which stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And those kinds of objectives then can be followed up with reporting that shows the meaningful and relevant outcomes for your participants or clients. These evaluation sections might lack measurement tools or data sources that are identified, or have not fully demonstrated what does success look like on the impact level, which is really how do we know that this project has been successful on a broader level. A new pitfall that funders are seeing in applications is that there's, again, organization-specific details or inconsistencies between the narrative, budget, and outcomes. And we're seeing that as connected to the greater use of artificial intelligence, AI programs like ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, Claude. So we want to address that, and I'm going to do that next. But the result of an application like that appears to rely heavily on AI being reviewed is not customized. And we've included this, I've personally included this observation in my intangible section in reviewing applications for FCP. It is one of my, one of my cranky spots. So let me talk a little bit about responsible use of AI in grant writing from our perspective. Toby, next slide. First, in the chat, have any of you ever used AI in any part of your grant writing process? Just let us know in the chat. Let me take a look here and see what we're getting. just getting started. It's helpful. That's good. All right, so I'm glad to see that people are dipping their toes in. And let me just provide some points about really best practices in using AI and where you need to be careful and take some extra time for reviewing your application when you use this tool. So AI can be really useful in brainstorming ideas and doing some research, although that research should be validated by other sources because AI sometimes hallucinates, as we know, or draws on information that's out there that really should be validated from another source. AI can be useful in refining language. I often use AI to create bullet points from a larger text. So that can be a really useful application. As I mentioned earlier, though, one of the biggest risks of using AI when writing a grant is that you do not review or customize the language generated by using those AI prompts. So what that looks like to the board reviewer is that there's no specific examples, participant stories, or other references to your organization's programs. And reviewers will know that that application was generated largely by using AI. So how that lands is that board members will see that the organization, or will conclude that the organization is not putting in the effort to present a quality proposal that shows and not just tells how the program is aligned with the priorities of the funder and how it will achieve positive change among real people in the local community. You really need those specifics. Inconsistent wording or references raise the same concerns about the use of AI that replaces quality proposal writing. Personally, I find generic language that contains jargon, buzzwords, but does not really say anything meaningful about the organization, program, or alignment specifically, that can be more damaging to an application than if there are grammatical or punctuation errors, but there is an authentic voice behind that. So please make sure that you review your application carefully from the standpoint of the use of AI and make sure that it clearly reflects what's great about your organization, how your programs are effective, your role in the community, and do so with an authentic voice. If AI can help you get there, it is another tool in your toolbox. So I pass this back to Morgan for some more insights from the review room.
Thank you, Patty. I think AI is such an interesting conversation. Whether we like it or not, it's here. And I see Toby put in the chat, it's definitely a good tool for character count. I agree, Erica, it's like the golden tool for AI. Word counts, character counts, especially when they include spaces. It's a great use of it. All right, so in review, these questions that you see here on the slides are the kinds of questions that are being asked. They're often being asked out loud in our discussions in the boardroom. Does this clearly align with our priorities? What will actually change if this project is funded? Does this organization have the capacity to do what they're proposing? Does the budget match the narrative? And are they telling the same story? And ultimately, is this the best use of our funding right now in this moment? Oftentimes, especially in times of uncertainty, funders have to make difficult decisions or choose to focus more heavily on the pressing issues, especially when we're focused on the immediate community. For example, when SNAP funding was taken away this year, many funders stepped up to provide emergency assistance to support food pantries, and that was the focus of the time. Current events can and do play a role in grant making and might add a particular sense of urgency to certain proposals, going back to Patty's discussion of the intangibles. What does the moment look like, and how are we going to meet the moment as a funder? And sometimes, unfortunately, just due to the volume of applications that we have, we can't fund everyone. or maybe we choose to fund a larger pool of applicants at a lower amount. It really just depends on that moment. And the big takeaway here is when your proposal is clear, it's concise, it's well aligned, it makes it so much easier for someone in that room to understand it and to advocate for it. We wish we could fund all of the work that we hear about, so we want you to succeed. Even if it's not for that particular grant cycle that you receive a grant, we want to help you get there. So I will turn it back to Patty one last time to discuss reporting.
Thank you so much, Morgan. And I see our time that we're almost at 10:20, so I will just make a couple of points about the importance of reporting. I've been on both sides of it. Interim and final reports is what private funders usually focus on. The interim report is really about transparency and mid-course correction. What sometimes happens is when you propose a program, it doesn't start up the way you think it's going to. There are hitches. It's a proposal, and that's what a proposal means. It might look different on the ground, and it might be a problem with hiring staff on time, recruiting participants. Unfortunately, we do see that organizations feel reluctant to reach out to the funder to make them aware of these issues, to explore a new approach or to seek help. So many funders are concerned when a grantee has not spent funds in that first part of that funding year, let's say the first 6 months, as spent funds are really evidence that grant activity is taking place. And there is some truth to this. The funder can work with the organization to revise your approach, to work through barriers, to approve changes in the way you use the funding. As Morgan talked about, when possible, the relationship between the private funder and the grantee should be one of collaboration, because everybody wants to see a successful grant project that has positive impact with people in the community. The final report serves as a way to make sure, again, that the program or the project has been implemented, that it reached the outcomes and the overall impact that were intended. We use sometimes the final reports to think about what challenges and barriers to implementation are out there. It's important to not only show statistics, but also to have some qualitative data in your reports, so that there's observation of the participants in the narratives of those reports, and it's telling a story and showing a story about how those individuals or families or the community has reached the goals of the program. And finally, it's important to the organization to use the reporting not only as a requirement to the funder, but also as a way to review your own implementation of the project. What worked? What didn't work? How could the timing be adjusted for a smoother project startup? And other kinds of improvements that will create, hopefully, greater impact helping those people in those communities. So I pass this to Morgan to close out, and hopefully we have time for some questions.
Thank you, Patty. So as Patty said, we're going to shift into our final portion, which is Q&A. This is really your time. We're happy to answer any questions about what we've covered today. And again, if we don't get to your question, please feel free to reach out to either of us via email on the slide here. We also ask you to complete a quick feedback survey. You can do that by either scanning this QR code. There's also a little bit of a link there. This will also be sent to you in a follow-up email with the recording of this presentation. The survey just really helps us continue to improve these workshops and make them useful to you for the future. Thank you again for being here, and we're excited to hear your questions. Feel free to come off mute for questions. No questions?
I have a question. It's Kelly from the Bucks County Children's Museum. I love the fact that you're one of the only organizations, I wish more organizations did it, funding organizations that offers operational support. Do you tend to look at business or nonprofits that are in good financial standing overall to offer operational support, or do you try to give your operational support to more to organizations that are struggling financially?
Toby, I
Well,
saw you come off mute. Do you want to take that?
that's a loaded question, Kelly. Um, I think we certainly look at the financials, and if there are red flags, I mean that is certainly part of the discussion when grants are being evaluated at the board level. I think I can't think of that many examples. There have been some where they've been turned down because of the organization's financial situation, that it just wasn't a good time to make a grant because the organization was struggling. But because of the kind of funder we are, and the grant sizes that we offer, it's probably less of an issue than for us rather than for organizations that may provide six-figure grants and beyond, that probably look a little bit more closely at finances, operational excellence of an organization if they are going into seven-figure grants. I mean, we go up to 15, 20, $25,000 on occasion. So larger grants, yes, we look a little bit more closely at the finances, but I think for us, it's really the project program that is being requested for support that plays the majority role in the decision making.
We had a question in the chat from Demita. What programs/software is recommended to be used for the management of grants? I said in the past I've used a platform called Instrumental. That's been really, really helpful. It does have a little bit of a hefty fee for it. There are other tools such as Airtable, where you can create a spreadsheet and automations and different things. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but I found it fun to use. I don't know if anyone else in the group has a platform that they use that they really enjoy. No? Okay.
Another way you can engage a platform would be like a project management tool that might help you with the timing and the timeline. I talked about, you need to ask for letters of support right away, even though there's other things that have to be done to produce the grant. And project management timeline would help you set up what needs to be done when. And there's some, like I've been using Trello, which is part of Altusian, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I'm using a free version. Doesn't do everything for you, but I've used within Microsoft Office, the Teams function. You can do a planner in there if you already have. I see some nodding. You can set up a kind of a project management flow for yourself using tools that you probably already have.
Yeah, that's a good one, Patty. I've also heard Asana is good, or Monday.
Yeah, Monday I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
I thank you, Morgan, and thank you, Patty, and thank you, Toby. It's Gene at St. Mary. So we're finding it really exciting that more of our grantors are working to align with what some of our project and program colleagues internally are attempting to accomplish. An example might be if a set program period is 12 months. And one of our project partners might say, you know what, we really need 18 months to accomplish what we're trying to do. Is that negotiable with a grantor? And we're finding more and more that it is. Some will say to us, you set your own grant period based on what you're trying to accomplish. Is that a model that Foundations Community Partnership has ever contemplated? That type of partnership model where we're working to align with your priorities, is the grantor working to align with our project and program colleagues?
I'll say right now, all of our grants are 12-month grants, so it's expected that the funds are expended by the end of that 12-month period. If they're expended in a couple weeks, that's fine. They can submit the final report. But we do ask that it's within the 12-month period currently. However, we have had instances where there's special circumstances and an organization reaches out and says, can we have more time? We didn't have the time to expend all the funds, or the project was paused for some reason. We always work with them and can provide those extensions when needed. I don't know if Toby, you have another comment on that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Morgan and Patty, and thanks, Toby. This is more of a front-end negotiation rather than an extension.
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, I think not necessarily have we engaged in that, like from organization to organization. I think where we're trying to listen to the nonprofit community is by tending to change our grant cycles as the conditions as the conditions change on the in the community, and make sure that we're meeting kind of the community's needs. So as your clients approach you and say, hey, we need this, and that becomes really something that the community highly needs, so the nonprofit community responds to that. So do we try to switch our grant cycles in a way that either is inclusive of that, or maybe a specific grant cycle that would address a particular situation. Our board, and I'd just like to point out, Walt Stortz is on the line here as well from our board, as well as Kristen DeDominic. So thank you for making the time. But, we bring that information that we hear from all of you back to the board, and then make recommendations. So, okay, what kind of grant cycle can we create if our current ones do not address those, to allow nonprofits then to apply to us to address that specific need? So an example was Morgan mentioned earlier, the SNAP crisis, and all of you kind of rallied around to try to address this emerging need for several months. So we try to straight up make gifts to organizations that serve the whole county in order to address that, but also started a rapid response fund for those organizations that lost state or federal contracts, and made the decision that they wanted to continue, obviously, providing those services, to come to us to apply for funding that way, and make it a quick turnaround. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Toby. You guys are awesome.
I'll quote you on that.
Okay, any other questions? I know we're at time, a little over time. Well, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to email us. You'll also receive an email with the recording and a PDF printout of the slides as well. So thank you all for being here. We appreciate it, and hope to hear from some of these new organizations who aren't as familiar with FCP. We'd love to meet with you. Reach out anytime.